What's going on, guys? Agent Jim Shorts coming at you with another video for yins today. The last few months have been a real bummer for movies in general. The MCU is no exception. We've been waiting for the Black Widow movie and we haven't gotten it, and there's been nothing to fill our appetite. Because I've been starving for some MCU, I started to think about what could be done in the future to make the MCU better. It didn't take long for the X-Men to come to my mind. After considering how Marvel would introduce these characters in the MCU's version of the X-Men, I realized there are some incredible characters who could be a new and fresh take, and not just a rehash of what the Fox franchise gave us. Obviously, we're gonna see Wolverine, Professor X, and the rest of the guys, but there are plenty of other awesome characters that the general population may not be so familiar with, and I think those characters can make a big splash on the big screen. So today we have 5 lesser known X-Men we need in the MCU. Also, I just want to give a quick shout out before we get to the list. I want to say thank you to all of you guys who went over and followed me on Instagram. I just hit 1,000 followers this past week, and I'm beyond blown away by you all. Thanks so much for the love and support. And as always, if you guys could take a second to like and subscribe to the channel, that would be great. Anyway, let's get to the list. Coming in at number 5 on the list is someone who keeps the X-Men up and running in tip-top shape. That would be none other than the cyborg handyman and sorcerer, Forge. Forge is a Native American mutant who was brought up within the Cheyenne Indian culture. He was trained as a medicine man and was taught the ways of mysticism by his people. He eventually had a falling out with his teacher and decided to leave his homeland to join the military. While in combat, several of his best friends were killed right before his eyes. In a blind rage, Forge used their dying spirits to conjure up a mystical portal to summon demons to destroy the men who killed his best friends. After coming to his senses, Forge realized the power he unleashed, and as a last-ditch effort to close the portal, he called in an airstrike onto the entire area. While he was successful at banishing the demons, it came at a great cost. The bombs took off his right leg and his right hand. Now, if you've been paying attention, you might say, wait, Agent Jim Shorts, isn't this guy with the X-Men? Wouldn't he have a mutant ability then? And yes, you'd be right. While the lingering loss of his 2 limbs made Forge pretty apprehensive to use sorcery again, he had no issue using his mutant gift, which allowed him to have a superhuman intellect and essentially be able to invent or fix any type of technology he worked on. That superpower came in very handy as he's able to make cybernetic replacements for the limbs he lost. Wow, that was a bad pun. Came very handy. Haha. Anyway, Forge is awesome because he's a different version of an X-Men. He doesn't read minds or have bone claws. He builds things that allow the rest of the team to function at a very high level. Ever wonder who fixes the Blackbird? Well, yeah, that's Forge. That's the guy who fixes the billion-dollar jet. Coming in at number 4 on our list is someone who isn't actually technically a mutant. That being the case, this character is a long-standing member and friend of the X-Men, and is kind of a mutant of sorts. This character is none other than Longshot. Longshot is an artificially created human life form that has the ability to defy probability. All that basically means is he's a clone who has really good luck. He was created on Mojo World, which is basically a big reality TV planet where this big blob named Mojo rules them with an iron fist and has slaves, and it's pretty terrible. But anyway, Mojo is a big villain in the X-Men, so obviously the head of the rebellion against Mojo, aka Longshot, would naturally become friends with the X-Men. As I just alluded to, Longshot has started a rebellion against Mojo on the planet Mojo World. He encouraged his fellow slaves to rise up and fight against the oppression. This obviously made him not very popular with Mojo and the other oppressors. Longshot has eventually gotten out of the clutch of Mojo and has went to forge his own career as a superhero and overall adventurer for doing good. As I said earlier, he has good luck powers. They were genetically altered and made into him when he was cloned, so that's why I said he's kind of a mutant, but not really. His powers are a bit ill-defined, but effectively, he was born to be lucky. Quote from one of the creators, he's lucky in a miraculous way. He's born with his talents to have access to being lucky. So, for example, if he's going to fall off a building, and there was the classic Assassin's Creed basket of hay sitting there, he would always hit the basket of clay, because he's Longshot and he's lucky. Why he's so much fun is that he's such a cool character with a really different vibe and overall feel. He's a rebel fighting against oppression, but is still really upbeat and energetic, and still is caring about his fellow man. He has described his powers as being lucky only when his heart and intentions are pure, so he believes he has to be good in order for his powers to work. Whether or not this is true is up for some debate, but because he's a generally good person, he hasn't really had to put it to the test. I think this could be a really cool addition for the MCU, because we could get a whole Mojoverse spin-off. All that being said, Longshot is super cool and will always be one of my favorites. Not to mention, he is awesome in HeroClix, if you know what that is. I think the MCU would be better off for having him in it, and I would just really hope we get to see it. Number 3 on our list has a bit of a cult following in the comic community, and that's for pretty good reason. This character is none other than Mimic. In the 1960s, Mimic was actually the first character to be added to Xavier's original X-Men team. After having a mishap with a variety of chemicals, Calvin Rankin found himself able to copy people's skills and memories. He later discovered that he could also copy people's superpowers and mutant genes. Why I find this character interesting is because he's not your typical good young X-Men member. He initially fought with the original group of X-Men and then tried to secretly join their ranks and eventually steal all their powers. He did this until he had his mind wiped by Professor X. I think Mimic would be a really cool addition to the MCU's X-Men roster once they've been established in the universe. He could be a really cool rogue agent in the X-Men's midst that could cause a lot of drama and strife on the team. He's not a true hero, but he isn't an outright villain either. He's somewhere in between. A good example of what Mimic could be in the MCU's X-Men is what Terra was to the Teen Titans in the Judas contract. Like Terra, Mimic could bond with the team and eventually betray them, leaving the fans having a very heartfelt struggle when the rest of the team is forced to confront him. He is such a cool character with so much potential. I think he'd be so cool and could really show off some new powers in the MCU. We gotta get him, guys. Let's go. Rolling into number 2, we find Quentin Quire, aka Kid Omega. Kid Omega is one of the newer recruits to the X-Mansion and was Professor X's star student. He gets his name from the fact that he's an Omega level mutant and is still just a teenager. For those of you who are unaware of how mutants' powers are broken down and classified in the comics, Professor X is considered an alpha level mutant. Yes, alpha level mutant. Quentin, aka Kid Omega, is beyond even that level, so yeah, this kid's crazy powerful, even more than Professor X. He's a telepath and a telekinetic, kind of along the lines of Jean Grey, but a bit weirder. Like Jean, he's considered to be a potential host for the Phoenix Force, and thus is really sought after. Where he differs from Jean and most other mutant telepaths is that he has different subtle powers that the rest of the world fails to fully comprehend. He can create artificial universes in his mind, has a genius level intellect, and he can make psychic weapons similar to the ones Psylocke makes, as well as other crazy abilities that have been touched on throughout the comics. You may be thinking, gosh, AGS, this sounds like a way overpowered dude who would just be another Jean Grey. Well, while that may sound right, Quentin actually has some distinguishing factors that make him a way more interesting character than some. One thing I think could be a really cool discussion point in the MCU is the fact that he used to use the mutant drug Kick when he was at Xavier's school. This basically enhances his abilities and powers. If you ever went to college or are going to go, I'm sure you're aware that there are various people who use various drugs to improve their academic performance. I think Kid Omega could be a really cool parallel to that point and highlight an issue that real people and real kids struggle with. It makes him a way more interesting and dynamic character, as well as relatable, because under all that power and genius, he's an insecure kid who's doing everything he can to try and seem like he's living up to the expectation that others have put on him. Again, Kid Omega is a really cool character, and I think the MCU could create a Tony Stark, Peter Parker-esque relationship with Quentin and Professor X that could really play well on the big screen. Last, but definitely not least, is the top entry of the day. And our number 1 new X-Men is Hope Summers. Many of you guys are probably well aware of who Hope Summers is and understand why I'm putting her at number 1. But for those of you who aren't familiar with her, let me get you caught up to all the hype. Several years ago, there was a comic event where the Scarlet Witch, yes, the very same one who currently resides in the MCU, so yeah, this could totally happen, the Scarlet Witch accidentally used her powers to wipe out all but 198 of the mutants in the world. This is obviously a devastating blow to the mutant population, and made many mutant leaders, specifically Magneto and Cyclops, become even more extreme and protective of the remaining mutants on Earth. This led to a bunch of crazy comic stories that we don't have time to get into, but all that to say, there was eventually a mutant born after this catastrophe. That new hope for mutant kind turned out to be Hope Summers. All the mutants were looking up to her, and many considered her a type of mutant messiah because she seemed to mark the rebirth of the mutant race. After many crazy battles, she eventually is given to Cable, where she time travels with her new father figure. Cable trains up Hope to be a grade A badass with guns and all the futuristic tech Cable has, and eventually comes back to the present. Outside of her fighting abilities she learned from Cable, she's also an Omega level mutant. Her gift allows her to use the powers of mutants near her, but it also seems that she has her own unique powers deep down within herself. She's immune to Rogue's deadly touch, she's cured other people of mutant viruses, and the villain Strife has even insinuated that she has psychic powers more powerful than he's ever seen. The basics of Hope Summers is, she's the badass adopted daughter of Cable, and she can kill you even without her powers. But she can also copy the powers of all people and all characters, and she has untapped potential that we're still waiting to see. I personally enjoy this character because she's such an underdog. She was thrown into this war for herself and her people at the very moment she was born. She never had any say in how people decided she was going to be the mutant messiah, and she decided to fight and claw her way through these difficult times to carve out her own path. I think the MCU is so well set up for an AVX adaptation, it's not even funny. I may get into the details of the story at a later time, but the Cliff Notes version is, the Phoenix Force is coming back to Earth, and the X-Men want it to come back, but the Avengers don't, and Hope Summers is caught in the middle. Needless to say, this war between these two iconic groups of heroes is some of my favorite comics of all time, and all this comes to a pinnacle moment where Hope Summer really shines. All that to say, the MCU should set up the X-Men and give us a double dose of Hope Summers. And you made it to the end of the video. Thanks for watching, guys. If you haven't already, it'd be awesome if you guys could take a second to like and subscribe. Also, if you want to know the moment we come out with new videos, just tap the bell icon and never miss a video again. If you want to learn more about these characters we talked about today while supporting the channel, we have Amazon affiliate links to some of these awesome comics and shows that'll let you dive in more to these characters. Anyways, thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to stay frosty.